When we're in pain, it usually makes sense. But sometimes, it just doesn't. In 1863, after the gruesome Battle of Gettysburg, wounded soldiers laid in makeshift hospital tents, but they were still not left in peace, because they were being haunted by ghosts. Not the ghosts of their enemies, but the ghosts of their own arms and legs that they lost from the war. There were tingles and even excruciating pain from body parts that were no longer with them, in the space that was now filled with air instead of flesh and blood. But these guys weren't alone. Almost a century before that, a British Admiral Lord Nelson felt the presence of his arm that he lost from a battle, and he concluded that this was the evidence that souls existed. If our arms could exist after it's gone, why not a whole person after he's dead? And I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, if it wasn't for science, I couldn't have come up with a better theory. But it's not a soul, and it's not a ghost. It's not even wishful thinking. It's called the phantom limb. And in fact, over 80% of the people who lose their limbs experience this phenomenon. But how in the world is this possible? And what does it mean for our body and our brain? Let's dive into it. When we feel something in our body, like pain, what's really happening is that our body is sending news about what's going on to our nervous system, and then it reacting accordingly. Pain sucks, but it's important for our survival, or at least it used to, because nothing beats pain in making us do anything to get rid of it, and ultimately fight the source of that pain. But when a limb gets amputated, our brain loses an informant, but for the time being is still trying to figure out what's happening out there. And like the FBI agent from that crime show who loses his informant for its case and is now in desperate need for more leads to continue getting support for his investigation, which he's convinced will save the country, or in this case our body, our brain does some irrational things. For example, it can mistake other body parts reports as the limbs. Some arm amputees can feel on their arms that's no longer there what they feel on their cheeks. Leg amputees, on the other hand, have it better because there were cases where they could get orgasms in their phantom legs from having sex. And they're actually reported to be much more intense than the normal orgasms, well, because our legs are much bigger than our genitals. In other instances, our brains can hold on to the feelings from the moment before the limbs are gone, which can be less of a surprise to the person than these cases, but definitely more painful. People whose arms were in a cast before they had to be amputated feel like their lost arm is now frozen in cement. And worse, soldiers whose arms were blown off by a grenade in their hands have experienced that excruciating moment on endless repeat. So you can tell by now that having a phantom limb is no fun. But how can you get rid of a limb that's already not there? This is an Indian-American neuroscientist, V.S. Ramachandran, and they say he's the guy when it comes to phantom limbs. But his solution to this problem is just amazingly simple. This is his tool, his own invention called the mirror box. It's called a mirror box because it's a box with a mirror on the inside of one of its two compartments. Amputees who seek his therapy have to put their good arms into the side that has the mirror, and what's left of the other arms in the other. And they are to see the mirror image of their good arm acting like it's the arm on the other side. From this activity, their brains get the impression that their lost arm is moving and well, and just from this shift in our brain's perception of its arms, much of the tension or pain they had in their ghost arms can be released. Right? Merely a changed opinion of their body changed their experience. What this shows is a remarkable insight into our body and sensation. We don't need a body part to feel pain, we only need body image. More generally, how we feel about our body is just our brain's perceived opinion. And it only doesn't feel that way because it's right most of the time. But for some of us, our perceptions can be distorted as for the amputees. That's why when anorexics experience their bodies as fat, they really are. And a beauty like Marilyn Monroe could believe she had many bodily defects. Heck, we all fall victim to the placebo effect. We think a pill is supposed to work, and so it does. And finally, I don't think anyone watching this would have called out the amputees who were experiencing pains in their lost limbs and say that since those arms didn't exist, they weren't really experiencing pain. Because every way that we experience our body, phantom limb pain included, comes from our brains anyways. They're just our brain's reactions, but real reactions. So if you're hurting, regardless of whether you can see it or touch it. Don't wait on the word to verify that for you. You're just as entitled to seek solutions as those who are experiencing pain in their ghost arms or even in their real arms.